Welcome to the West Ham Voice. Thank you for joining me. Brief show on the managerial situation that we're finding ourselves in, or the Premier League managerial merry-go-round that's going on. On the day that this morning we heard Thomas Tuchel was the latest managerial casualty in the Premier League, and the fact that Chelsea have now been given permission to speak to Brighton manager Graham Potter, I find myself in a bit of a dilemma. I find myself in a little bit of a quandary. I've been accused of being a bit too blinkered, in my view, on David Moyes. I've been accused of being so pro David Moyes that even if we lost 15 games in a row, I'd still advocate to keep the manager and I wouldn't be calling for him to be sacked. I've also been accused of not having too much technical knowledge about football. So that's why I can't see why David Moyes is failing, especially with his tactics of the long ball and settling to be more defensive in some games and not really taking that chance, that risk of trying to compete with teams and trying to beat them. So I look around me and I look at YouTube content and I look at people commenting on social media platforms, etc. And the noise out brigade, it seems to be getting louder and louder. So I ask myself, is it me that's out of touch? Is it me that is too blinkered? Am I the one avoiding the obvious and defending the indefensible? Or is this a blip that we need to get through? And what we need to do is to back the manager, especially where everybody acknowledges it's a period of transition at the club with so many new players having come in. So I've tried to do my own analysis. I've tried to sort of look at the situation to kind of give myself a better understanding of where we're at and how we got here. So I've got to look at last season and the games that we played this season, and I've sort of broken them down. We played 64 games in the 2021-22 season and 2022-23 season in total so far. 44 of those games have been in the Premier League, 12 in the Europa League, 2 in the Europa Conference, and 6 domestic cup games. Now, out of those games, we won 29. 45% success rate. We've drawn another 11, a 17.5% success rate, and we've been defeated in 24 games, 37.5%. So if you combine the games that we've actually got something out of, either a win or a draw, that's a 62.5% success rate, which to many people, be quite honest with you, isn't that bad. Now, when we look at the formation and people sort of accusing David Moyes of, playing too defensively, etc., this is what these are the results that we've come up with. We've used the 4-2-3-1 system that David Moyes prefers 49 times in those 64 games. That means we've used different formations 15 times, different formations throughout last season and a couple of times this season as well. So what, I hear you ask? Well, if we're going to either prove or disprove the theory that Moyes is being too defensive and that's not good for the team, we've got to look at the success of changing formations and to see whether Moyes was right or whether he was wrong. Last season, with the formation changes, he won 6 and lost 6. So it's a 50-50 split. Now, this season, with the formation changes, he's made 3 formation changes in the games that we played. He's won 2 out of 3. And if we look at the result against Chelsea at the weekend and looking at what VAR did and the acknowledgement that the VAR decision was wrong, then it would have been a success rate of 3 out of 3. We would have won 2 games and we would have drawn 1 in this season with the fact that David Moyes has changed the formation. So when people are saying he changes the formation, he goes too defensive, it's not good, etc., you got to look at those stats and you got to say, well, actually, it works for us. It may not be pretty to watch, it may not be great to watch, but we've got results with the change of formation, being defensive, out of teams like Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, Wolves, Aston Villa, Seville. By making formation changes, we've actually got results from, ironically, some of the bigger teams. We've either got a win or we've got a draw out of those teams. So, despite many fans, as I said, getting upset that David Moyes is too defensive minded, overall, he's proven to be correct in his approach. But like I say, for us, it's not pretty to watch. And of course, people are going to also argue that other teams have gone for it and other teams have got results, etc. But yeah, they have done. But we know what David Moyes is like. We know he's safety first. And given the fact that he's made 15 formation changes out of the 64 games played last season and this season so far, and having got 9 out of those 15 changes right in terms of getting a positive result, you can't argue that perhaps he probably knows better than what we do as fans as to what is required to get something out of a game. Then we look at the stats that many have been thrown around over the past few weeks about how our form has continued from the end of last season into this season, and how our last 20 odd games have meant that we've been We've been playing relegation football. Look, I don't know when this rumor started, but I've looked at the last 20, 21 games, Premier League games, and we have won 6 out of those Premier League games and drawn 5. And even though we've lost 10, the return on those 21 games has been a return of 23 points. And we know that we usually need around 40 points to avoid relegation. So, okay, that run isn't going to give us top 6, isn't going to give us even the top 10. It's going to give us the sort of bottom half of the league, but it isn't going to give us relegation. It's going to give us, okay, many are going to argue, well, it's going to be close or thereabouts, but it's still not going to give us relegation form. And then we look at those last 21 games and have to consider what else was going on at the time. So the 21 league games in context dispersed throughout that run from last February until now. We played FA Cup football. We played Europa League football, reaching the semi-finals of that stage, and you can't say that. And we know that also we had a team last season that didn't have the strength in depth, and we know that. We know there were mistakes made in January, and that could have been avoided. But with having to play more football, Europa League, cup competitions, etc. You got to say that, as we know, the team was stretched, which is why it contributed to our league form being poor. And then we look at this season, and many people are saying, oh, the bad form has run into this season. Out of the 6 games that we played in the league, how many can hand on heart say we played badly? There's only 2 games that we played badly in, and that's Man City and Brighton. We were deeply unlucky against Nottingham Forest. On any other given day, we would have thumped them maybe 3 or 4-1, hitting the post a couple of times, missing a penalty, etc. And in the games against Spurs and Chelsea, one could argue that if Scamacca was fit, then he would have played in those games, and the results in those games may have been different. And then, of course, as I said, we all know what happened in the Chelsea game, where we were cheated from a result because of VAR. Now, had we not dropped those points, had we won against Spurs, had we won against Chelsea, had we drawn against Chelsea, then maybe we'd have had another 4 points on top of the points we had, and people would not necessarily have been talking about David Moyes, getting rid of him and hating the formations that we played, etc. Instead, his detractors would have been singing his praises on how we've had such a decent start in the season. But look. I read an article the other day from 6'2" by a 6'2" member, Barry Meikle. Barry spoke about the last 3 performances against Villa, Spurs and Chelsea, and suggested that's certainly been an improvement in the way we played. And then Barry went on to talk about the next 5 league games that are going to be important to West Ham. And the next 5 league games, as we know, are going to be against Newcastle, Everton, Wolves, Fulham and Southampton. Now, he suggested that they should be winnable games. And then he went on to say, but knowing West Ham, how do we know anymore what's a winnable and not a winnable game? And he talked about how these teams have all ended up in the bottom half of the league last season. So if you put that into context, we should be able to get results from these next 5 games. And that might determine where we're at and what sort of season we might be facing. Look, If David Moyes doesn't get results from this, and if we're sort of still languishing after these 5 games near the bottom of the league, then perhaps we start talking very differently about David Moyes and start talking very differently about what might happen to him as a manager and whether he might be the next managerial casualty in the Premier League. Maybe Brendan Rodgers actually might be the next one, but he might follow soon after if we don't get the positive results out of this. But we've also got to put into context, the players that we've got. And a lot of fans are saying, why is he not playing the new players? Why is he not playing the new players, etc.? And let's look at those players as well. Lucas Paqueta was the last signing in the transfer window. He's only had now just over a full week's worth of training with the squad, as he was introduced in the Spurs game with the admission that he barely passed the ball to any of the other team members in training because he didn't have that much time. He's now got a week. He started against Chelsea, and I dare say that if he doesn't start against the team Steaua Bucharest on Thursday in the Europa Conference, then he'll certainly be in the lineup against Newcastle at the weekend. So we can see that Paqueta is already part of the thinking. The unfortunate scenario in pre-season with Naifa Gerd, who got injured before any of the league games started. But we kind of feel that once he comes back, then Moyes is certainly going to be looking at him as quite a possible starter soon after he returns from injury. Thilo Kehrer. If Gerd didn't get the injury, maybe we wouldn't have signed Thilo Kehrer. But it looks like he's been trusted. Okay, many will argue that Moyes had no choice to bring Kehrer in because of the injury crisis that we've got. But Kehrer is settled in, and now there's going to be true competition to the centre-back slots in the side. And Kehrer's already being used as well. Gianluca Scamacca. Look, as I've just said, had he not been ill over the last week, then it would be almost definite that he would have featured either as a starter or as a sub in both the Spurs and the Chelsea games. And there's this rumor knocking around that Scamacca has apparently spoken to the some Italian newspaper or magazine and saying that he realized he's made a mistake in signing for the wrong team. I'd really like to see a cover of that because I think that's just a really terrible rumor that's knocking around. And then, of course, Maxwell Cornet. And people are asking, well, why has Maxwell Cornet not been playing? Well, true. The reason is because he didn't have a full pre-season with Burnley. And he's only just recently returned to full match fitness, also getting game time in the Europa Conference games against Viborg. And we saw he came on and he had an immediate impact in the game against Chelsea. And I think we're going to now see Cornet. He might have a little bit of a run out again on Thursday against Steaua Bucharest. But I think we're going to see a lot more of Cornet in the coming weeks in the Premier League. So we are using the players that we've got. Okay, the only other players, Areola. We now realise he's going to be the cup goalie. And there's a lot of people, including myself, that suggest that maybe he should be the goalie in the Premier League as well. There's young Flynn Downs, where he said in interviews that he's found it a lot harder to sort of get to grips with the Premier League, etc. But I think his time will come as well. So when people are asking why is David Moyes not using these players, he's introducing them slowly, but in the right possible way. So the conclusion: look, people are speculating, or people are shouting out from the rafters, we should be sacking David Moyes. He should be gone because of his attitude, etc., because of his approach in using defensive-minded formations. But as I've shown in the 15 games over last season and this season that he's gone defensive-minded, we've actually won more than we've lost. So you could argue that his approach seems to work for West Ham overall. Look, this whole thing about David Moyes and getting on his back, etc., I've said myself, if David Moyes, especially after what Barry has said in his article in 6foot2.co.uk, if we don't win or if we don't get positive results out of the next 5 games and start climbing up the Premier League table, then yes, okay, you might argue that maybe there's a case to be answered as to whether David Moyes is the right manager to take the team forward. But it's premature. It's far too premature to say that. And I think we need to sort of, in the time of transition, we need to give that We need to give Moyes that opportunity to be able to demonstrate what he can do with the new squad that he's got. Thank you all for joining. If you're new to the channel, please hit the like and subscribe button. You've got there you go, West Ham voice at the bottom there. Please hit the like, subscribe, and the bell notification to let you know when I'm next on. Very much appreciated. I should be back later on with a preview of the Steaua Bucharest game with a Steaua Bucharest fan. So do join me for that as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.